Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining me. My name is Kristen and these are my currently inked pens for August 2023. So my bottled ink for the month is Sailor 50 States, Georgia. I opted to ink up my newest fountain pen, the Esterbrook Estie Oversize, with a journaler nib. They actually came in the same order. And because of the color, I just felt that it would be a really nice match. I would love to see how it looks and performs in this journaler nib. This first Inkvent color for the month, Diamine Arctic Blast, is inked up in my TWSBI Diamond 580 with a 1.1 stub nib. I wanted to see if I would enjoy this just as much as I enjoy SIG nibs and cursive italic grinds. The second Inkvent color, Diamine Spruce, is a scented ink. So it's a deep, cool toned green with a red sheen. I've inked that up in a LAMY Studio. It has a new rubberized grip from one of my previous videos. And this nib is a long knife nib that I purchased on AliExpress. I really wanted to get a better understanding of how this nib performs with a pretty reliable ink. So it looks like this ink is more on the wetter side. Hopefully there will be no performance issues with the ink itself. And the only thing that I'll have to really focus on is whether or not I like this long knife nib grind. I've got my other LAMY Studio. This is the matte black version. It has a fine nib and it's inked up with Diamine Ancient Copper. This is my pen pal selection for the month. This is such a beautiful color and I am looking forward to using it. There are a couple things that I want to try out this month. One of those things is these yellow orange inks. I'm back to the yellow orange inks again. I recently purchased a sample of Rhodia and Klingner Helianthus and I've inked it up in my Franklin Christoph Model 3 with a fine SIG nib. And I wanted to compare this one with the next pen, which it looks so great next to this one. But this is my other Franklin Christoph Model 3. This one has a medium SIG nib and I've inked this one up with another orange yellow ink, Stipula Saffron. Oh, we already got some leaking going on right there. But these are the two ink pairings that I've got going on to really see, do I like a more punchy yellow orange color or do I like something that's a little bit more subdued? I'm leaning more towards subdued. I'm not sure if orange yellow inks are actually going to be added to my permanent collection, but really this is just a test to see if this is something that I enjoy every now and then, or if I'm just like, you know what, it's okay, it's not for me. So that's what I'm going to work on this month. I just want to see if a difference in nib width or nib grind is going to change my opinion of inks in this color range. This is my other diagnostic test for the month of August. Oof, lots of ink on the nib. This is my Platinum 3776 Century. It has a soft, fine nib, so it's pretty dry and it's pretty particular about the types of inks that I use with it. So I remember using in a previous month Diamine Pick Me Up. It was a nice wet ink, but because of the sheen, it was a little bit too thick for this soft, fine nib. Last month I used Diamine Poinsettia. It was an awesome pairing and I had absolutely no complaints about that ink. But just in case that ink didn't work, I had some backups. I had some backup inks and this is one of those backup inks, Platinum Lavender Black. So this month I'm going to be testing out Lavender Black, putting platinum inks with a platinum pen. Hopefully it's going to be, you know, love at first sight, love at first write. I got high hopes. If I do not enjoy this color, I do have a few other platinum classic black inks that I can try after this one, but this is the one that I really hope is going to work out for me. My next two fountain pens actually both have Robert Oster Old Book Smell. This is my LAMY 2000 and this is my Jinhao 80. Now that I have a great nib on this pen, it's now got an extra fine nib. I really want to compare these two side by side to really see if it's worth paying the extra money to get the official LAMY 2000. I purchased this one first because I did not want to spend more than $100 on a fountain pen that looked ridiculously plain. Initially, I really enjoyed using this pen, and so I took the leap and I purchased this one. I had some pretty bad initial experiences with this. I actually preferred writing with the Jinhao 80 over the LAMY 2000, but that was just because of the nib. So now that they're both very reliable writers, I want to put them side by side, have no other variables but the pens themselves, so that I could really gauge what I like and what I don't like about each fountain pen. All right, so I'm going to get started with the writing samples for each of these pens. This ink is so dark that I can't really tell if all the shimmer has been reincorporated into the ink. Oof. This is so thick. Why did I go in all caps? This is really pale. I need to run some brass through those tines maybe. So it looks a little deeper and more dull than I was anticipating. I'll have to check that. I guess those are correct. Okay, that's just me barely touching the paper because I'm just scared to touch the paper with this nib. It's a soft fine and I feel like I have to be super duper careful with it. Look at that. I like the color change. Taking a look at these fountain pen inks, I really do love Sailor 50 States Georgia. I did test it out, and you'll see in the unboxing of my Esterbrook SD Oversize that I just loved it. I really do. I love that ink color. So yeah, no surprises there. Moving on to the TWSBI Diamond 580. That is super juicy. It seems that all of my TWSBI fountain pens are super duper saturated when I first ink them up. I have to give them a solid writing session before I can really understand how the ink performs, because at first inking TWSBIs, they just dump the ink onto the paper. So maybe after a session or two, I'll be able to see exactly what's going on with this nib. Because if you see right here, it looked like I was gonna have a problem. I might have to take a closer look at the nib to see if there's like a little bit of some baby's bottom going on with a stub nib. Has anyone else experienced baby's bottom with a stub nib? There was no ink between the two tines. After a couple strokes, it got to writing and it flooded the page like all of my other TWSBIs do. And this ink is so cool. So I see the blue color, but then there's like that super red sheen with this blue shimmer on top. Diamine Spruce. I was expecting a deep dark color. I don't think it's the fault of the ink. This is absolutely not a dry ink. The way that it was laying down on the paper when I first swatched it, it felt like a wetter ink. On this paper, it looks really dry. And I think it's because of the long knife nib. I really think that I'm gonna want to run some brass shims through those tines to kind of get it to loosen up, do a little bit of wiggling, and maybe some, 7 strokes inky happiness or whatever it is with inquiring minds. I might do a little bit of some work on that. And since it's not a super expensive fountain pen nib, I feel much more comfortable working on this. It's a nice color. I just wish that it would lay down a bit more ink. Diamine Ancient Copper is lovely, as I suspected. It's looking a little bit more brown than I thought it would, and it's actually not a bad thing. I'm loving it. The last time that I used this fountain pen, it felt like the fine nib was a bit too thin, a bit too harsh for me, but right now with Diamine Ancient Copper, it seems like I think I just needed the right color to go along with a nib that was so fine. Helianthus is a nice color. It is super bright. I have no complaints right now. And it seems that Stipula Saffron is a muted version. It's a much more muted version. And it feels like I almost don't want these two colors next to each other because of how bright Helianthus is and how soft Saffron is. I really do enjoy Saffron on its own. But sitting next to Helianthus, it looks dirty. It looks a little underwhelming next to Helianthus. I'm looking forward to writing with these solo. And I'm glad that I put them in fountain pens with SIG nibs because they look really nice. Platinum Lavender Black is looking good. I like how it looks wet and I like how it looks dry. There were no issues with the performance of the fountain pen. It was just like, this right here is my fault. I was barely touching the paper because I have to consciously tell myself not to press down. Sometimes I'm not pressing down hard enough. It's a good fountain pen. And it seems like Platinum Lavender Black is going to work well with the pen. So thank you all for those of you who recommended Platinum Classic inks to go with this platinum pen, because I'm enjoying already Platinum Lavender Black. I am torn. I'm so torn. Let me check and make sure I can't even see whether or not it did burp or spurt anything out, but I am so torn between these two fountain pens. They look and write so well. The color of the ink looks really good. And I have to be honest with you, I like both of them. This feels heavier and it feels more substantial when you're writing on paper. This one feels like it's whispering across the paper. It is light, as almost as light as a feather, but it almost feels like it's whispering, and this is a very quiet fountain pen. So it doesn't have a substantial weight, it doesn't have a substantial presence, it doesn't have substantial noise or feedback when you're writing on paper. But this one does. It lets you know what it is. It lets you know exactly what it's here to do. And this one is just, I don't know, but they're good. They're both good. So we'll see how my opinions, my first impressions change as the month goes by. The two ink colors that I was preparing to carry over from my previous ink flight into my August, I emptied them. I emptied the pens because they were underwhelming. They were a bit underwhelming. So Dominant Industry Les Nuages, it was not as great as I thought that it would be. And Dominant Industry Horizon. It was a lovely blue color, but so I'm looking forward to my August Inkflight box. I'm ready to add a couple more ink colors. I was trying my best not to add additional inks for this month because I knew that I was going to add something from my August Inkflight subscription box. I'll be back after I do some writing samples on Midori, Iroful, and Rhodia papers. As a recap, these are the inks on 52 GSM Tomoe River paper. Here are the inks on Midori paper. It actually looks a little bit darker. Platinum Lavender Black looks a little bit darker on Tomoe River than it does on Midori. Old Book Smell looks a bit more of an orange brown on Tomoe River, and it's a bit more red here. The same thing with Diamine Ancient Copper. It's a little bit more red on Midori paper. Shimmer and Sheen looks great on both papers. Sailor 50 States Georgia looks a bit more green on Tomoe River paper. Oh wow. And I can barely tell what color it is on Iroful paper. It seems that dry writing pens or dry pen and ink combinations perform much better on Iroful paper. So it was not a pleasant experience using this combination on Tomoe River paper. It also wasn't all that great on Midori paper. There was a noticeable difference when I switched over to Iroful paper. It wasn't terrible. I still want to do some work on this throughout the month. And I've noticed that this fine sig nib and this medium sig nib have basically the same line width. I'm not sure if Rhodia and Klingner Helianthus is a wet ink, but it's looking like this fine sig nib is writing just as broadly as this medium sig. So I wonder if this is a wetter ink and this is a drier ink. Robert Oster Old Book Smell in these two fountain pens. Now I've noticed that using my LAMY 2000, it feels like I'm writing on leather. What is it? Nubuck leather. It is a very pleasant experience. It's got like that drag, that feedback that I feel going across the paper. And Robert Oster Old Book Smell in the Jinhao, it's still a pleasant experience, but it feels like the ink is wetter. And the nib, this still has like an architect style grind to it. I definitely notice a difference when I'm writing with this one. Like this is making me feel like this is more of a marker. Now, this Diamine Arctic Blast, I was struggling. I didn't even realize that this 1.1 stub is as thick as it is. I pulled out one of my little note cards to see if writing in cursive would kind of help with the nib feeling so big and overwhelming to me. And it seems that cursive might be a better option than just doing this, because if I am sticking with block letters, then this fountain pen is only going to be used when I need to write a header, which is not a bad thing. Absolutely not. And it's a beautiful color, a beautiful ink to use for headers. But I was just wondering if I wrote in cursive, you know, how would I feel about using this ink in cursive? Would I be able to do a full writing session with this 1.1 stub nib? Maybe. Now this is Rhodia paper, and this was a pain to use at an angle. This long knife nib absolutely needs some work. But all of these other ones look so lovely. They look so nice. I really do love how the sig nibs look when I write in cursive. They're so nice. I really do enjoy the cleaner, sharper, finer nibs. Botanical Gardens, the journaler nib was actually pretty good as well. It's a much more subtle nib grind than I was anticipating. It's not bad, but I do find myself preferring more of a difference between the horizontal and the vertical strokes. So it's a journaler nib. I'll go ahead and put the long knife. Fine sig. Oh, I mixed up some ink. Ooh, it doesn't like this paper. just for fun. Well, it does show a noticeable difference between the vertical and horizontal strokes, the journaler nib. I feel like the SIG nibs are much more noticeable while I'm writing. Now, this long knife and the extra fine LAMY 2000 nib are more similar to each other. The vertical strokes are narrower than the horizontal strokes, but this is only evident when I'm writing. With the Jinhao 80, the smoothness of that nib, it feels like it's inviting me to sign my name on a document. I feel like I can just freely write with the Jinhao 80. The LAMY 2000, it feels more like a conscious experience. If you have a LAMY 2000 and a Jinhao 80, please help me out. Help out your fellow viewers. What are the differences that you've experienced between these two fountain pens? Because they're both absolutely fantastic writers. I love how this feels. And I love the architect character of this nib, but this is still an excellent writer in its own right. I really do like how these inks look on this paper, 8mm line height. It's so spacious. It allows me to really embrace my natural handwriting when I can write a little bit bigger. For the past couple of years, I've grown accustomed to writing in Hobonichi notebooks, and writing in an 8mm line notebook is so refreshing. It's so nice. It feels like I don't really have to be conscious about how large or small or neatly or sloppily that I'm writing. That was just a random thought. I like these colors. I'm looking forward to using them. This is a nice one. Sailor 50 States, Georgia is a lovely color. I'm from Georgia. I love this color. I'm so glad that I love this color. But mostly, it's actually all of the warmer colors. It's Diamine Ancient Copper, Roller and Klinger Helianthus, Stipula Saffron. I might have to think about that one. But an old Robert Oster Old Book Smell. Now, with Platinum Lavender Black, it looks nice. And it has me worried, kind of like in the same way last month Diamine Celebration worried me. It's got me feeling like it's going to skip at any moment, but it doesn't. So it kind of like the shading in this ink looks so light, but then it darkens to its nice, lovely lavender black color. It's very pleasant. It just has me worried. So we'll see if I like it. So far, I prefer Diamine Poinsettia over Platinum Lavender Black, but this is a very nice option, and I really do think that I'm going to enjoy the color this month, even if I don't so much enjoy the level of wetness of this ink. So these are my initial thoughts on my currently inked pens for August 2023. If you have any questions or comments, remember to leave them below, and I will see you in the next video. Have a good day. Bye-bye.